Brave New World, Chapter 6, Part 1. Odd, odd, odd was Lenina's verdict on Bernard Marx. So odd, indeed, that in the course of the succeeding weeks she had wondered more than once whether she shouldn't change her mind about the New Mexico holiday and go instead to the North Pole with Benito Hoover. The trouble was that she knew the North Pole, had been there with George Edsel only last summer, and what was more, found it pretty grim. Nothing to do. And the hotel, too hopelessly old fashioned. No television laid on no television laid on in the bedrooms, no scent organ, only the more putrid synthetic music, and not more than 25 escalator squash courts for over 200 guests. No, decidedly, she couldn't face the North Pole again. Added to which, she had only been to America once before, and even then, how inadequately. A cheap weekend in New York. Had it been with Jean Jacques as Hababaloo or Bokanovsky Jones? She couldn't remember. Anyhow, it was of absolutely no importance. The prospect of flying west again, and for a whole week, was very inviting. Moreover, for at least 3 days of that week, they would be in the Savage Reservation. Not more than half a dozen people in the whole center had ever been inside a Savage Reservation. As an Alpha Plus psychologist, Bernard was one of the few men she knew entitled to a permit. For Lenina, the opportunity was unique, and yet so unique also was Bernard's oddness that she had hesitated to take it, had actually thought of asking or of risking the pole again with funny old Benito. At least Benito was normal, whereas Bernard, alcohol in his blood surrogate, was Fanny's explanation of every eccentricity. But Henry, with whom one evening when they were in bed together, Lenina had rather anxiously discussed her new lover, Henry had compared poor Bernard to a rhinoceros. You can't teach a rhinoceros tricks, he had explained in his brief and vigorous style. Some men are almost rhinoceroses. They don't respond properly to conditioning. Poor devils, Bernard's one of them. Luckily for him, he's pretty good at his job. Otherwise, the director would never have kept him. However, he added consolingly, I think he's pretty harmless. Pretty harmless, perhaps, but also pretty disquieting. That mania, to start with, for doing things in private, which meant, in practice, not doing anything at all. For what was there that one could do in private, apart, of course, from going to bed? But one couldn't do that all the time. Yes, what was there? Precious little. The first afternoon they went out together was particularly fine. Lenina had suggested a swim at Toki Country Club, followed by dinner at the Oxford Union. But Bernard thought there would be too much of a crowd. Then what about a round of electromagnetic golf at St. Andrews? But again, no. Bernard considered that electromagnetic golf was a waste of time. Then what's time for? Asked Lenina in some astonishment. Apparently, for going on walks in the Lake District. For that was what he now proposed. Land on the top of Skiddaw and walk for a couple of hours in the heather. Alone with you, Lenina. But Bernard, we shall be alone all night. Bernard blushed and looked away. I meant alone for talking, he mumbled. Talking? But what about? Walking and talking? That seemed a very odd way of spending an afternoon. In the end, she persuaded him, much against his will, to fly over to Amsterdam to see the semi-demi finals of the Women's Heavyweight Wrestling Championship. In a crowd, he grumbled, as usual. He remained obstinately gloomy the whole afternoon. Wouldn't talk to Lenina's friends, of whom they met dozens in the ice cream Soma bar between the wrestling bouts, and in spite of his misery, absolutely refused to take the half-gram raspberry sundae which she pressed upon him. I'd rather be myself, he said. Myself and nasty, not somebody else, however jolly. A gram in time saves nine, said Lenina, producing a bright treasure of sleep-taught wisdom. Bernard pushed away the proffered glass impatiently. Now, don't lose your temper, she said. Remember, 1 cubic centimeter cures 10 gloomy sentiments. Oh, for Ford's sake, be quiet, he shouted. Lenina shrugged her shoulders. A gram is always better than a dam, she concluded with dignity, and drank the sundae herself. On their way back across the channel, Bernard insisted on stopping his propeller and hovering on his helicopter screws within 100 feet of the waves. The weather had taken a change for the worse. A southwesterly wind had sprung up and the sky was cloudy. Look, he commanded. But it's horrible, said Lenina, shrinking back from the window. She was appalled by the rushing emptiness of the night, by the black foam flecked water heaving beneath them, by the pale face of the moon, so haggard and distracted among the hastening clouds. Let's turn on the radio, quick! She reached for the dialing knob and on the dashboard and turned it at random. Skies are blue inside of you, saying 16 trembling falsettos. The weather's always. Then a hiccup and silence. Bernard had switched off the current. I want to look at the sea in peace, he said. One can't even look with that beastly noise going on. But it's lovely, and I don't want to look. But I do, he insisted. It makes me feel as though he hesitated, searching for words with which to express himself, as though I were more me. If you see what I mean, more on my own, not so completely a part of something else, not just a cell in a social body. Doesn't it make you feel like that, Lenina? But Lenina was crying. It's horrible! It's horrible! She kept repeating. And how can you talk like that about not wanting to be part of the social body? After all, everyone works for everyone else. We can't do without anyone, even epsilons. Yes, I know, said Bernard decisively. Even epsilons are useful. So am I, and I'm damned well wish I weren't. Lenina was shocked by his blasphemy. Bernard, she protested in a voice of amazed distress. How can you? In a different key, how can I? He repeated meditatively. No, the real problem is, how is it that I can't? Or rather, because after all, I know quite well why I can't. What would it be like if I could, if I were free, not enslaved by my conditioning? But Bernard, you're saying the most awful things. Don't you wish you were free, Lenina? I don't know what you mean. I am free, free to have the most wonderful time. Everybody's happy nowadays. He laughed. Yes, everybody's happy nowadays. We began giving the children that at 5, but wouldn't you like to be free, to be happy in some other way, Lenina? In your own way, for example, not in everybody else's way. I I don't know what you mean, she repeated. Then turning to him, oh, oh do, oh do, let's go back, Bernard. She besought. I do so hate it here. Don't you like being with me? But of course, Bernard, it's this horrible place. I thought we'd be more together here, with nothing but the sea and moon. More together than in that crowd, or even in my room. Don't you understand that?